Hello, I'm Dan Ware. This is a special edition of Frankly Franklin. Normally we have one or maybe two guests on at a time, but today there are 6 people here. And we are taping this program for broadcast on the weekend of the Martin Luther King holiday. So I've gathered together a group of people to talk for a while about the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. It's a fairly diverse group in terms of both age and race and background, job history and whatnot. And while we were getting acquainted, everyone sort of introduced themselves to one another. They did that pretty well, so I think I'll let them introduce themselves to you before we begin our discussion. I'll start with the gentleman seated right next to me over here.
I'm Tom Moody. I'm a retired teacher of the Franklin Simpson school system. Worked in student council for a number of years with my cohort sitting next to me.
I'm Lucille Brooks. I'm also a retired school teacher from the Franklin Simpson school system. I worked with student council 18 years. I am now director of the African American Heritage Center and have been since 1992.
And I'm Richard Bridges. I'm pastor of the Franklin Presbyterian Church.
I'm Scott Gamble. I'm a 1980 graduate of Franklin Simpson High School, and I presently work as a field supervisor for pretrial services. And I was about 6 years old when Dr. King was assassinated.
My name is Jessica Lunsford, and I'm a freshman at Franklin Simpson High School. I was born in San Antonio, Texas, but I moved here when I was an infant. So I'm glad to be here today.
My name is Kenneth Holt. I'm a 1964 graduate of Lincoln High School. I'm a 39-year employee of Tyco Electronic, and I've been a resident of Simpson County all my life, 57 years.
All right, thank you all. Well, you can knock me over with a feather. The preacher said less than anybody when we went around. Made the introductions. Reverend Bridges was on back in 2002 talking about September 11th, and he was, I think, the vice chairman or vice president of the ministerial fellowship. So does that mean in 2003 you are the head of that, or not necessarily?
No, not necessarily, especially after you opening with an insult to me. I think I probably will lose that office.
Well, how do you know that wasn't a compliment?
I don't know, Dan. I know you pretty well.
We were talking before we started the tape rolling, and I told my guests that thinking about national holidays that we observe and the ones that are named for people, the Martin Luther King holiday is the only holiday that is in honor of someone that there are a lot of people alive today who remember. I mean, we don't know anybody who could remember Abraham Lincoln or George Washington or Christopher Columbus. And I think maybe Veterans Day or Armistice Day started after World War I, and I remember when I was a kid some World War I veterans. They're long gone. So I think the fact that we can gather a group of people that remember this person that has a holiday in his honor is unusual and worth talking about. But I think before those of us that remember when he was alive talk, I'm going to start with the youngest person here. And Jessica, I'm going to put you on the spot. If somebody asked you who was Dr. Martin Luther King, what would you tell them?
He was a very determined man that stood up for what he believed in, no matter who was with him. And he got me to where I am today, to be able to have white friends and black friends all at the same time, and be able to fellowship with them in the spirit of love and not with hate.
All right. Tom, you used to teach history. How did Jessica do there with an elegy for Dr. King?
She did very well. I was thinking with some amusement that when in teaching history we talked about Martin Luther, the students thought I was speaking about Martin Luther King. So, of course, that historic perspective is expected, I think, because Martin Luther King was living nearer our time than the reformer Martin Luther.
I want to come back to that point because, you know the phrase, what's in a name, and the original Martin Luther was a reformer, and Martin Luther King, I guess, was named after him. I don't know that for sure, but two men who were Christians, who were preachers, I guess would be a fair term. Well, is that?
That's fair.
Is that
That's fair.
you want to go ahead and tackle that, and I'll come back to where I was heading on
Oh,
that.
well, I mean, of course, the Martin Luther King holiday is such a bittersweet experience for me because I grew up in a highly segregated community. And it was a civil rights movement that had a profound influence on really what I believed, on my theology, because the white church, by and large, was not part of this movement at all. And I can remember my disappointment as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old boy. My disappointment in listening to church members for whom I had had respect react with so much bitterness and anger. And yet what I was seeing as a boy was exactly what I would expect it out of a Christian, and the fact that the civil rights movement had its home in the church is a terrifically important thing, not only for me, but for the whole movement, I think.
Yeah, and I want to talk some more about that as we go along, because I think that for all his accomplishments, I mean, Dr. King's vocation was a preacher, and he tried to persuade people with words.
I'd say you did a pretty good job.
Yeah, and you know, I've heard a lot of very eloquent black preachers, and I've heard you, Dick. You don't do too badly for a white boy. But
Don't try to make up to me.
but we've had the Martin Luther King holiday since 1986. So probably from about the time you remember, there was holiday in his honor. But now, Scott, you said you were 6 when he was killed.
Yes.
You were, I guess, by 86, you were about grown by the time we had the holiday.
Yes.
So when somebody asks you about the civil rights movement, do you think immediately of Martin Luther King, or are there lots of folks? I mean, when you were small and you're being told about black history either at home or at school, was he singled out, or was he one among many?
I think from what I heard in school, he was one of the most important ones, one that was probably mentioned the most. As far as what he means to me and that question, his efforts, along with others in the civil rights movement, opened the doors for a lot of African Americans to have an opportunity to get better jobs and be included in quality education. So when I hear his name, that's what it means to me. If it wasn't for Dr. King, a lot of blacks today wouldn't have the opportunity to have professional jobs. So.
I think the first time that I ever knew who he was when I saw on television some coverage of the March on Washington in 1963, where in front of the Lincoln Memorial there were several speakers, and Martin Luther King gave the I Have a Dream speech there. And I remember just seeing that on the black and white TV and stopping and watching, because, you know, he was such a powerful speaker. I don't think I was old enough to have an understanding of the things he was talking about, but that's the first memory I have of him. Ken, when you first knew who he was?
You're probably right after they had the protest in Montgomery, Alabama. Can't think of the lady's name.
Yeah, the Rosa Parks.
Rosa Parks incident.
Okay.
Right, and he was the leader of the protest of the people not riding the bus at that time. So that's when I started looking into it. But I came more aware of it. Basically, when you said the first time he gave the speech, the 63 speech, I had just got home from school, and I didn't know how powerful a speaker he was until I heard this speech, and it still radiates today.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of the observances, I think that speech is read, and it certainly has the power to move anyone. I think the dates there, Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat in 1955, and then the boycott of the Montgomery Bus Company was throughout 1956, and they integrated in December of 56. Now, Ms. Brooks, if you'd been in Montgomery in 1955, you'd have probably sat in your seat too. But when did you first hear of Martin Luther King?
Well, I guess we were naming these dates. In 1954 was the desegregation of schools, and of course, I get all of this mixed up, and because the desegregation of schools gave motivation to various attitudes for blacks to strive to do better things, and the Rosa Parks event, and Dr. Martin Luther King and the marches in Birmingham. I remember a friend that I went to school with was a journalist, and when he went back to his hotel room to write the story concerning the march in Birmingham, he had a fatal heart attack. And so I have seen this on both sides before he came, and after Dr. Martin Luther King started opening the doors wider for us. I think that he was about the most dynamic person that we have had to open the doors and let America know of how that we should treat each other in America.
You know, during the 1960s, we had President Kennedy assassinated, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, and a lot of us who were alive then certainly remember where we were when President Kennedy was assassinated. Do you remember where you were, Lucille, when you got the news about Dr. King's assassination?
No, I don't. I remember where I was when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. But I don't remember where I was when Dr. King was assassinated. But I think I was over in the gym teaching, and of course, televisions weren't available to the classrooms at that time. And I got the message after school rather than during the school hour. I remember very vividly the next day when we came to school, the children were upset because of his death, and some wanted to go home. And I guess if we were living in this period of time, we would have had counselors to counsel the children. I think they did finally let some of the children go home that wanted to leave, but you had to approach the assistant principal in order to get that privilege, and they didn't want to fly the flag half-mast, and assistant principal went out to get the flag up, and he was getting the flag up, and he was getting it upside down, and I was teaching physics and looking out at them, getting the flag up, and the children said, "Oh, he has the flag upside down." I said, "Oh, he'll get it right." And it was at that time I could feel division among the children, and the black children, the white children, and some division among the teachers also.
Well, this would have been like 4 years after we integrated
Yes.
our school system here. Now, you mentioned in 1954, the Supreme Court ruled that the idea of separate but equal was unconstitutional. But I don't think that our school district was certainly the last one to desegregate it. I mean, it took like 10 years. Tom, what do you remember of that period? I know you're something of a historian, as to how from 54 to 64, when our school here was integrated, and I guess maybe were most other schools that had not integrated up until that point integrated around that time. I know there was a Civil Rights Act of 64. Do you have any, I don't mean to put you on the spot at all, but do you have any recollection of, how we moved through those 10-year period there?
Well, I remember the first black student who came to be in the high school. Or it could have been at middle school.
Was that Jerry?
Jerry Valentine, and he was a model student. He was a wonderful person, as I remember it, and I would have to give tribute to him for helping bridge the fears, I guess that you might say, the first African-American person who came into the white society. It must have been very difficult for him, and yet I never saw him cower in any way or stand back, but that was a early moment as I remember it.
Didn't we have a year where integration was voluntary, and then the next year
I
Lincoln
think
closed? And we
that's the
just
way I
had one?
recall it. It was,
Yeah.
he was the voluntary person who came.
Yeah. Jerry and I rode the same school bus, incidentally. And I remember that first year, at first, when he would get on the bus and sit down, none of the white kids would sit on the same seat with him on the way into town, even if some of them had to stand. But I don't remember that lasting very long. And I can certainly remember some adults saying, some white adults saying some racially virulent things that kind of took me aback, like you were alluding to, Dick. But I don't remember our situation here being as divisive as in the Deep South. Now, is that just because I was too young to know, and it was a lot tenser than I realized? And Dick, you grew up in Hopkinsville, and Lucille's ready to talk, but I want to see what your experience was.
We're probably going to
compared
say
to
the
her.
same thing, I suspect, but in Christian County, the tension was extremely thick. It was not a happy place to be during those years. It was a very difficult place to be. Difficult if you were in the black community, and difficult if you were in the white community, and in sympathy with the needs and the rights of the black community.
I was going to say that the desegregating of the schools was not because they wanted to, but it was because of housing situations. The first year when they said it would be volunteer, and the 18 students went from Franklin Simpson, not all of them went to high school, but the majority were in high school. The superintendent came to school and asked the principal and my husband and I if we would just keep the children over at Lincoln, because they were just hanging out of the windows at Franklin Simpson until they could build a facility to hold the students. And of course, we couldn't do anything with the children. And it was here, it's just like a train. When the train comes, you have to get out of the way, else you'll get run over. And so this was the situation at that time. So it was almost thrust upon you because of the fact of, they felt like the children needed to have a better education and wanted to be in a facility where those type of things were provided.
I remember the lack of textbooks being discussed, or ragged textbooks that you could hardly...
Chemistry materials.
Yes, the facilities were so far inferior to the white situation.
I think one of the things that we forget, without question, Martin Luther King was and remains a pivotal figure in American social history, no question about that. And to some degree, when somebody says that he is the person responsible for the gains being made in the black community, that's a correct statement. But I also would point out that the focus nationally was on Dr. King and his courage and his articulation. But every community where progress was made had a Martin Luther King. And most of those people are nameless, and most of those people will never have a holiday for them. But I mean, he is the symbol for an extremely large number of folks at the grassroots level in every community. We all faced the same kinds of problems at different times, in different kinds of ways. And I just wish the younger generation could have the sense of how many people it took in this society for the vision of Dr. King to come true. He articulated it. He put his life on the line. But he had a lot of followers of all racial groups. But it's these local heroes that most of us will never know, to whom we really owe our debt of thanks.
Mm-hmm. Well, Scott, you and Jessica are, when he talks about the younger folks, I guess that would be you of our group here. And
A little bit younger.
Yeah. Does that seem like a way long time ago, these things that these older people are talking about? Is it kind of hard to, I guess we're talking about 40, 50 years ago, right? So you're what, 14?
Yes.
So does that seem like forever ago, or?
Seems like a very, very long time ago. And I don't remember anything because I probably wasn't even really well thought of. But to me, I know him as a teacher and a preacher and a speaker and a man of just courage. And that's all that I know him as. And I know that he paved the way, but he wasn't all alone. He had many followers, one of which was my great-grandfather. And I guess if it had not been...
Tell us who that is. Tell us.
Well, Dr. J.J. Northington. And he knows Martin King as a friend. And I don't know him like, like he's my friend or anything, but I just know him as someone who is down to earth. And that's all that I know him as, is just somebody who paved the way for me and who helped get me to where I am now and gave me much opportunities. And I guess I just thank him for that. So that's what
Your grandfather was at Elevated Baptist Church, I believe, for many years,
Yes.
and he might well qualify as one of those local people like Dick was talking about a minute ago. But I don't guess any of you all sitting here ever saw King speak in person, did you? So what you saw of him when he was alive was on television. And, we watched Walter Cronkite in my house every night. But I don't really remember the adults talking about what was going on in the Deep South. But I'm curious, at your house, Kenneth, did people talk about what was happening in Alabama? I mean, was that a big topic of conversation?
Yeah, I want to comment on something that Dr. Reverend Bridges said. He made a good point when he said that the thing that Martin Luther King did was he inspired other individuals in other towns to be like him. In fact, we have one here, John Johnson. We have a very volatile situation, and people probably don't remember this, a lot of people, but those my age do. The movie Mississippi Burning was actually based upon the 3 freedom rights workers dying in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And in 67 or 68, the sheriff of Philadelphia, Mississippi, who had been exonerated down there, he came to Franklin to live.
Moved up here.
Lawrence Rainey. And so John Johnson was president of the NAACP at that time. And John was a passive type individual who was like Martin Luther King. He was firm in what he believed in, but he wanted to make sure everything was nonviolent. So he got us all together and told us that we were going to have a march downtown on a Monday night, because that night they were supposed to find out whether or not they were going to put Mr. Rainey in as a policeman here in Simpson County.
Okay.
Now, the situation is we all knew that what he was supposed to have done. So you're talking about a volatile situation about putting him as a policeman here in Simpson County. So John called a field worker from New York named Kenny Brown. He came in, and we went to city council meeting that night. And they talked, like you said, John talked eloquently to the mayor and explained to him, even though it looked like not a big thing behind an individual as policeman, what it meant to the black community, not only the black community, but the white community as well. And after John made his speech and Kenny Brown made his speech, the mayor saw that, this might not be a good situation to have at this time, and so he never was put in that position. So I'm saying that could have been a real volatile situation, but you had the whites and the blacks coming together on a common occurrence saying, look, this is not a good idea. This is not a good thing to have at this time. So that situation was diffused, and a lot of goodwill came from behind it. Because, I was part of the following John and doing this, so, but you can see the goodwill come along. It didn't carry all the ills.
Yeah.
But I'm saying it helped, steer the way for other things down the road.
you know, remembering back on that time, and maybe it's just because I was a little older, but it seemed to me that when the swimming pool was integrated was another time when it could have been a real volatile situation. To me, that seemed there was more tension there than with integrating the schools because, like Ms. Brooks said, you know, that was the law, and ready or not, we did it. And I don't, were you all, do you all remember the pool situation?
But the pool, the reason why that happened was it was during that period. But was it Pottinger that was up in Woodburn, in the rock quarry, and they were diving, and he was diving into this water, and he hit his head and died. And Brooks and I were coming from Paris, and we were just in the vicinity that you could hear the Franklin radio station, and when I heard it, and I said to Brooks, I said, the swimming pool will open. And he said, why? I said, we are not going to sit around and see our children get killed trying to swim with a swimming pool. And so it wasn't too many days hence when William Harris and Larry Holder went to approach the swimming pool to get in the swimming pool.
I can remember something else that on the positive side, probably sponsored by the Ministerial Association. It was the Thanksgiving service. It was held not in a church. That was threatening, perhaps, for the white churches, but it was held in the music room of the library. And black people were invited along with the white people. And it was a personal thing. You talk about the quiet people who made a difference. But I remember when my family and I went in to the service, there were black persons gathered, and my great aunt said, I want to go sit by, and I think it was probably Ms. Burris who was sitting there, and we did, and that was a personal victory for me. That was a kind of heroic effort. It's a big thing, but it woke me up internally, and I was proud of my great aunt for doing that.
Yeah, and it goes back to what Dick was saying about the little things there.
But I think there were people in the community who were wanting to make a difference and to join forces, and certainly in Thanksgiving, a national holiday, that made a difference.
Well, you know, back when things were segregated, I think that the easiest thing for people of both races was to accept the world as you found it, and, you know, to try to change it takes quite a bit of courage that I don't know that a lot of us have. And I have seen the pictures of in the Deep South with the signs on the public restrooms, you know, whites only or whites and colored, and I'm not quite old enough, but I assume we had the same sort of thing in Franklin. I mean, we weren't any different than any other Southern, so, yeah.
On the corner of the courtemore square.
Oh, yes, they were here.
Absolutely.
Water drinking fountains, colored only.
I remember years ago, of course, we had a movie theater in Hopkinsville, had the ubiquitous balcony. And blacks were seated in the balcony, whites on the main floor. And not only that, well, you had a separate box office for blacks. Couldn't even buy this ticket with the same box office. The box office for whites was on the street. The box office for blacks was on the alley. And the entryway to the balcony was on the alley. And years later, after all this had faded, I went back to that theater, which had been converted into an art center for the community. And as a 40-year-old man, walked up the steps to the balcony for the first time in my life. I had been to scores of movies as a child, and that movie happens. But the balcony was always forbidden territory. And you know, white children were, our questions were never answered about the balcony, ever. And I had the strangest feeling when I walked into that balcony. And I cannot tell anybody how, what a cleansing experience it is for those days to be gone. And I know we still have the problem of racism in this country. It still eats at us. But the atmosphere has changed so dramatically that it's difficult. Even now, my children, I have a 24-year-old son, Jessica, and a 17-year-old, well, 18 next month. And it's such a pleasure for me to be able to say, my sons cannot remember that time. I am glad they cannot. They never grew up in that, but I grew up in it. And the distance economically between black population, white population was absolutely enormous. We talk about poverty today, but I grew up in Gracie, a little bitty 600-person village, and the retching poverty of black rural population in Kentucky was third. I mean, I guarantee you, it was third world. It was third world.
We had a similar situation here at the Roxy, but the thing that I've labor over as an individual, I was oblivious to the fact. I knew blacks went to the balcony, but it did not register to me as being wrong. But
that's just the way things were
that's the way
done.
things were. In 1956, when I went to Memphis to college, I was driving with some friends down Beale Street, and I saw above a building, Colored Hotel, and that's when it shocked me. I had never, and then it dawned on me, where would a black person stay if he or she were traveling? And that was my wake-up call in terms of the injustice of it all.
I can remember when I got old enough to go to the hayfield and the tobacco patch, the drinking water was in a mason jar in a paper sack under the tree, and everybody drank out of the same jar, but when it was lunchtime, the whites all ate and then the blacks, and I couldn't quite figure out what the reason for it was, but nobody talked about it, and it wasn't something that I brought up and asked at that age. But Ms. Brooks, you went to the University of Kentucky. You traveled quite a bit. Now, in segregation times, it was no picnic here, I understand, but I bet it was much worse, like Tom was saying, if you had to go somewhere, was it not?
Yes, you had no place to stay. This is one advantage of going to a black college, and that was you met people from various towns and various states. And if you were traveling, you would let the person know that you would be in that vicinity, and you would stay the night with them. This would be one way that you would do that, or they would find a place for you. They had boarding houses and places like that you can stay. But I would like to take the movie theater back just a little bit.
Okay.
Where Alpha Church's parking lot is, and where the African American Heritage Center's garden spot is, there was a little building there, and they would get the roll of film from downtown, from the Jones Theater, and a guy would take it up there on a bicycle, and they'd show it to the blacks up there in that place. And we do have a description of that house that we could recreate it if we would like to.
So you're saying after it shows downtown to the whites,
Yes,
they take the same reel
Yes,
up there and show it in a completely different location?
Savannah Hale, Mr. Robert Hale's brother. And then there was a theater where the Alpha Church parking lot is, the long house before it was demolished. And this was all black, and the ticket taker and all of those were black. Then I guess it was Jones Theater.
The Liberty Theater?
Liberty. That's right. You had to walk to go to the theater. You had to walk down the alley and then up the stairs and then in the balcony. And so to go to Roxy, that was a step up. And in talking about traveling, I found that the further south you went, you were at an advantage because of the fact they knew the conditions and they provided for the conditions. Like they would have maids in the train stations and the bus stations and things like that. Larger cities, you wouldn't go to town unless you wanted something out of the ordinary, like for fur coats and things like that, and which you wouldn't be buying anyway. But like if you were going to a shoe store, like they have a line of seats, and the last two seats were designated black for blacks on both sides, and you didn't sit in those seats. And then if there were garments that you had to try on, you had to estimate whether you would be able to wear them or not, whether it fit you, or whether the colors became you, so forth. And but in large cities like Birmingham and Atlanta, places like that, they had their own stores and drugstores, things like that. And you could go into the drugstore and get sundaes fixed like people ate sundaes and banana splits and things at that time. And I think they were more of it to an advantage than we were up here.
Yeah. Well, now, during those times of segregation, there were many more stores in the Harristown section of Franklin, right? I mean, a lot of black-owned businesses. Kenneth, do you remember when there were a cluster of stores kind of located right together there in Harristown? Or?
Well, I don't remember as far back in this book as saying about the movie theater, but I've read some books that they put together that showed that they had these. The only thing I remember when I was, we had a bunch of grocery stores. We had grocery stores on every corner. So, you know, we wouldn't have to go to town all the time. But otherwise, we didn't have any cleaning store, any dry goods stores or any cleaning facilities or anything like at that time. But before this, Ms. Brooks was saying, before this, back when it was you almost had to have those things within town, they had all those facilities in Harristown. Shows and cleaning facilities and blacksmith shops and all that stuff.
You've got your Lincoln High School letter jacket on there from the class of '64, which I guess, was that the last graduating class?
No.
In Lincoln?
65 was the last graduating class. You were talking earlier, the first class actually that went voluntarily, came to Franklin Simpson was the junior class my year.
Okay.
My senior year, it was voluntary.
Okay.
And then the year after I graduated was the last full year of school in Lincoln. 64 was the 64, 65 was the last school year. Then 65, 66 was the first year that they actually just integrated.
Yeah.
And if I could add to him what he said, if in '64, if they didn't have the course offered at Lincoln, you had the privilege to come to Franklin Simpson and get that course, because Richard Sewell came and took math classes at Franklin Simpson. It's done.
We had Kenneth on, Henry Stone interviewed him talking about athletics at Lincoln, and he talked about, I think, didn't you all play on the Franklin athletic field maybe on Saturday night after the white team had played on Friday?
Right. We started playing there in '63. And one reason for that was because we had a football field over there, but when they expanded, the construction took most of the football field. So they just decided, it'd be more convenient to have it here. So my sophomore year is when we started playing here at Franklin Simpson.
Yeah.
And my senior year, we started playing basketball at the facility of now.
I see. Well, when you had Lincoln School, that was kind of for the Harristown community, that was community school. You had the stores, so you've got all that history and heritage, which Ms. Brooks is working to preserve. But, we say we want a colorblind society in this country, yet we also say February is Black History Month and different ethnic groups need to preserve their history. Scott, how do we strike the right balance there in terms of equal opportunity? But, does it bother you when people talk about the days of segregation and all that, and you just assume they didn't bring that up because that's past us now? Or do you think that's something that people your age and Jessica's age need to learn and know about?
No, I think it's good that we still have discussions about it because I think if we don't talk about the past, we'll forget the past, and that's very dangerous. I think that as far as having Black History Month, I don't really think it should be just 1 month of Black History Month. I think that we need to be conscious of Black history year-round. I think more of it should be taught in our school system, locally in schools across the country. When I was going to school, probably the thing that was taught the most was about slavery, which was a very, very negative experience in our history. And Dr. King was mentioned some and talked about, and but it was very limited. It was very limited as to the Black history that kids were able to get. So I think the more people talk about it, the more awareness, and I think it's good that we talk about the past so that we can still remember the mistakes that were made and things that needed to be corrected, things that needed to be changed.
You know, sometimes I wonder in our multi-ethnic society, particularly in Bowling Green, where so many other groups, ethnic groups, religions are hitting the society, you might say, being incorporated into the schools, etc. And I'm wondering somehow or other if there isn't a legacy for us to think about through Dr. King, the nonviolent thing. These people have stories upon stories to tell, persecution, hardship, famine, you might say, and yet they're coming into our society and they're enriching it just as African Americans have enriched the society post-slavery, certainly. And
Didn't do too bad during slavery. They enriched somebody else, but
yes, that's true.
Well,
But I mean, their skills
Their skills
enriched
there.
many a plantation house or owner or whatever else. But I somehow or other, I just think as we approach this holiday, we might center on the heroic spirit and the nonviolent way in which we can sit down and talk with one another and appreciate one another for his or her qualities, abilities, knowledge, whatever it happens to be.
and what you're saying about Dr. King's insistence on a nonviolent approach, doesn't that harken back to what Dick was saying about the fact, that his social activism grew out of his Christian ministry? I mean,
Absolutely, yeah.
isn't that sort of a hate the sin but love the sinner approach? Or
Well, I don't know. Well, I mean, I think that's a good approach. I'm not sure that was what gave it the power. I think the concept of justice is found in the Bible is much more important to root, because that's the thing. If you go back and examine his writings, especially the work he did when he was a graduate student at Boston University up in Massachusetts, or Boston College. He really did center in on that biblical concept of justice. And I tell you the truth, Dan, the thing that bothers me most about the contemporary celebration, we still have a large section of the white community that looks upon Martin Luther King holiday as a black holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And
nobody says Lincoln's birthday is a holiday for only one race.
Well,
Yeah.
but the thing that I hope the white community has got, what we have to remember more than anything else, is that all of that horrific social separation that exists in this country was powered largely by the acquiescence of the white community. Now, when I was a boy growing up, I did not know many stereotypical, violent white racists. But I sure knew a lot of very polite, let's fit into the society, acquiescing people in my community. And I still long for the time when the holiday itself can be looked on as a national holiday. I don't think we're past that yet, not by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think, I'm terrifically disappointed in the generations. What year are you born in?
62.
Well, I like you. You're all right. But I mean, and this goes for both black and white, all racial groups. The last couple of three generations of young people had no idea the idealism, the commitment, the blood, sweat, and tears it took on the part of a lot of people. A lot of young people were the ones who motivated their elders to do the right thing in all of this. And if we could, people will say, oh, the 60s were a terrible time. It was a great time. It was a wonderful time in this country's history. And if we could celebrate that spirit of justice and doing what's right, we're not doing that yet. We're not there yet.
That's true, and you know, I've heard it said that it's voluntary rather than the law, but the most segregated time in American society is at 11 o'clock on Sunday, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. It may over time, but I don't think that's gonna. And you know, I guess you could argue whether that's good or bad. You know,
that's a product of society, of both of our societies. I mean, there are plenty of white churches that are predominantly white churches that have made that jump that gap. But the way people group themselves religiously is subject to a whole lot of things, a lot of different factors. So I take exception to that. I do, though, give testimony to the fact that in the 60s, white churches in large numbers suddenly found it necessary to revise their membership policies. And I have vivid memories of white churches suddenly coming up with membership committees where we never had membership committees before. The experience of the State Street Baptist Church in Bowling Green and the First Baptist Church, of which I was a pastor, I think is a good set piece of illustration. When the First Baptist Church of Bowling Green was formed in 1818, it was formed with both black and white members.
really? Mm-hmm.
And it was not until post-Civil War that the First Baptist Church of Bowling Green found a calling to found the State Street Baptist Church, which is the most prestigious black Baptist group in Bowling Green. A certain number of black members of First Baptist Church left to found that church, but the majority of black members did not want to do that. And then when you read the minutes, 2 or 3 years later, the First Baptist Church of Bowling Green found it necessary at a business meeting to forcibly remove all the rest of the black members. And I mean, the church's history with all this stuff, and I mean now the larger church history, is so complex.
Well, would you agree that race relations is really the big story in American history? I mean, they argued about it, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. We fought the Civil War. We had the Civil Rights Movement. And then, you know, just last month, there was all this controversy over what Trent Lott had to say. And, you know, Tiger Woods is looked to as to something's going to be done about letting women into a golf club in Georgia. He needs to lead the way. So I mean, aren't we every year on Martin Luther King Day and every day, aren't we kind of constantly revising and working on race relations? I mean,
Ought to be.
I think that what's disappointing for me is that true laws were changed and schools were integrated and there were a lot of change that were legislated, but hearts don't seem to have changed that much to me. When I was in school, there was a lot of self-segregation, if you will. You know, the black kids still sat on one side of the lunchroom and the white kids sat on the other side of the lunchroom. And, you know, I still don't see in small communities across the country or in this state that I'm familiar with, I don't see where hearts have really changed that much. And that's unfortunate because you know, of course there will always be sensitive white people in the community that embrace change and that that want to see people come together. But there will always be another segment of the community that's very, very conservative. And even though they may not mistreat someone of color, they don't want to have lunch with you, and they don't want to have a social life or relationship with you. So I don't think it's just the churches that are still somewhat separate, but I think the community in general around this state, for the most part, is still separate. Maybe equal to a great extent, but separate.
But if that's a generational thing, I mean, you know, as one generation passes on, do you think that'll change over a longer period? Maybe it hasn't changed that much in your lifetime, but isn't the trend in that direction?
I'm disappointed that it hasn't already changed. You know, like I said, you know, looking back in my days of growing up, sure, you had, you know, if you played sports, you had teammates that you were close to, but once the ball game was over, you went your way, they went theirs, and it still seems to be that way. I have children in school now, and you know, we try to teach our kids to like a person based on who they are and not their color, and that should be a secondary thing. But I don't think there's enough parents teaching their kids the same thing, that, you know, you should not be afraid to be friends with Johnny or Susie. Don't worry about the fact that they're black. You know, it's okay. You can reach out to other people.
Bill, did you have something? You look like you was ready to say something.
Yeah. Comment on what the Reverend said, and Scott. You know, I think it's a comfortability factor. I think, you know, we are more comfortable with situations that we have in common. Prime example would be, and this is my last contribution to this. He was saying about the religion factor. You know, we look at it, most of it is not color. The main thing Dr. King said, I'm going to come to that in a second, that I always equate everything with, you look at Catholics and Protestants in Ireland. Now, these people have the same complexion of skin. You look at the Bosnians and the Serbs in Croatia. These people have the same amount of skin, but they dislike each other a lot more probably than blacks and whites do. So Dr. King said, and this is the way I think about all the time, judge each individual by the content of his character and not by the color of his skin. So you're not going to like every white individual that you associate with. I'm not going to like every black individual I associate with. You judge each man by how well he treats other people and how well it's just liking people, being able to get along with people. So the skin color, I think, we aren't going to be able to change this for a long time. My kids, my great kids might, but it's always going to be there. But the thing that we need to do, and I think that we've always done this, is to try to tolerate and understand each other. We don't have to go to each other's house every night and have coffee and drink, as long as we respect each other. And I think that's what Dr. King was talking about. You know, have respect for each other. You know, judge each man by the content of his character. And, you know, then you'll find that, you know, that each individual carries great things of inside of himself.
Okay. Well, Ken said that was going to be his last contribution. I'm afraid it's going to have to be the last contribution for all of us because our time is up. But I want to thank all of you. It did turn into a conversation, which I was hoping would be the case, and I'm very grateful to all of you for that.
Looks like this is a big discussion for the future.
Well, you know, I would be open to doing this again, so perhaps we can have you folks back again, and we can do some more of this, but that's all the time for today. Before we go, depending on what time you're watching this program, there are Martin Luther King holiday activities planned Sunday at 3 o'clock at the Elevated Baptist Church, and Monday morning at 10:30, starting at the Greater Taylor Chapel Church, and marching down to the courthouse, where there will be speeches from the bandstand there. And the organizers of that event would like to see a large group of people turn out for that, and I'm sure they don't care what the color of their skin is if they come to it. And there's going to be a reception after both those events at the African American Heritage Center on Jefferson Street, and everybody's welcome to attend that as well. Ms. Brooks, did you want to add something about those events?
None other than on Saturday at 5 o'clock, the youth will be having that program at the Alpha Church.
Well, that's true. Unfortunately, by the time this airs, that will have already been, but hopefully the other publicity will get folks there for that as well. Okay, thank you all very much. Tom, if we can do it, we'll do it again. Okay? All right. This has been a special edition of Frankly Franklin. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dan Ware.